What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we're talking about the New York Giants once again, of course, on this channel. That's all we do, but we want to focus in on cornerback Deonte Banks, a player who long-term viewers of the channel know from last offseason. I really wanted him in the 2023 NFL Draft. The Giants landed him, trading up one spot to select Deonte Banks, a selection that I was super happy about and still am. I think that he looked really good as a rookie. Sure, he had his growing pains. There were some ups and downs. However, he was playing with a lot of subpar talent around him, I would argue, in the Giants secondary, and also was playing in a notoriously difficult to learn and develop in Wink Martindale defensive system. Wink Martindale's defense, a lot of man coverage, a lot of blitzing, puts your cornerbacks in very compromising positions more often than not. So for a rookie like Deonte Banks, you were expecting him to have his growing pains. But now going into 2024, Giants have a new defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, expected to play a lot more of a conservative brand of defense and also play in a lot more zone coverage, which should simplify things for Deonte Banks. But nevertheless, they are entering 2024 with a second-year player as their primary cover man in the secondary. So talking about Deonte Banks in this episode, we want to look at how much pressure he's going to be facing this season as CB1 for the New York Giants, especially considering they didn't do a whole lot to upgrade CB2 this offseason. Cordell Flott probably stepping in as the CB2. Adoree Jackson on his way out of here. The Giants chose not to re-sign him. So now, in some ways, it's kind of like Deonte Banks versus the world in this cornerback room for the New York Giants. It's a very young and inexperienced secondary, as we've kind of discussed on this channel already. But looking at Deonte Banks, a lot of pressure on his shoulders. Jerome Henderson said recently at OTAs that he has utmost confidence in Deonte Banks taking over that CB1 role, and I do too, but it is worth noting the Giants need him to rise to the occasion as a CB1. Otherwise, this secondary probably not going to be the best unit this upcoming season. So we do want to just discuss Deonte Banks, our expectations for him, and some of the factors that could cause him to have that great CB1 season, and some of the factors that might hold him back in 2024. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about Deonte Banks entering his second season in the CB1 role?
I'm doing pretty good, man. And listen, this Giants defense obviously is kind of top-heavy in a way that they have good pass rush with Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, but their secondary is a major concern. That's why we had this episode, what was it, yesterday or 2 days ago, where we talked about some of the cornerbacks on the market. Now, Xavier Howard going through a little bit of a strange legal situation, would rather stay away from him now in a big way. I think a lot of people would like to stay away from him in a big way. But I'll tell you what, right now, a guy like Stephon Gilmore makes a lot of sense for this Giants team. Why? Well, played over 1,000 snaps for 2 consecutive years. He's a veteran, probably a much more affordable option. He was their CB1 in Dallas last season, so he comes over from a Dallas situation where maybe he can give us some insight into what they run, how to beat their coverages, how to do some stuff there. So there's kind of inside information maybe that they can get. But also, he's a good veteran, and he's had success in the past. He's a former Buffalo Bill. He has experience, and it'll probably be a tangible relationship with Brian Daboll, and maybe not as much Daboll as he is to Joe Schoen, who was the assistant GM over there back in the day. But now you look at kind of what the Giants have on the roster. I think that they want Cordell Flott to be the guy. We kind of all want him to develop and become that guy, really cost efficient. Third round pick from LSU. Got a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. I think that he can be a good player. He just needs more experience. But do we want to run the risk of having a bad defense because our secondary is not only very, very shallow in terms of depth, but also very inexperienced? Deonte Banks, love the guy. I think he's going to be a really good NFL player. He had his fair share of struggles against elite talent last year, but listen, I'm happy he went against those top receivers. That's how you get tested. That's how what you see where you need to improve, how good you need to be to dominate some of those best guys. Now, if we reflect back on his rookie season, the guys that he really struggled against, Garrett Wilson was the one that really stood out to me. He had 100 yards allowed. He had 2 pass breakups in the game, but he gave up 100 yards. He was really just getting toasted all game. Devontae Adams put up 110 yards against him. Terry McLaurin had a touchdown against him, but I think he was pretty good. He had that one deep pass that he allowed. I kind of remember that. Other than that, I mean, he really was pretty solid for the most part. It was really those 3 games spanned: CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, and and Devonta Adams, where he gave up about 300 combined yards between those three all-pro level receivers. Aside from that, if you look at his stats, he didn't give up any more than 49 yards in any given game. Aside from that, Terry McLaurin, when we had 96 yards, he gave up a 31-yard reception. He had a couple of receptions where he gave up like 30-plus yards, but aside from that, like every other game was really, really good. For example, like 19 yards against Arizona, 49 yards against Arizona. Against San Francisco, 22 yards. Seattle, 34 yards. Miami, 15 yards. New England, 29. Green Bay, 40. New Orleans, 30. Philadelphia, 17 in week 16 last year. He was pretty solid across the board, aside from a little chunk of sample size there where he went up against some of the best in the league. But that's where you get your really real lessons in. That's where you fail and you learn from. So I'm happy he went up against those guys. But with that being said, if Deonte Banks goes down or something, or he gets an injury or he misses a couple games, the Giants are seriously screwed in the secondary, right? Like they have a lot of problems there. I personally think you take that $11.6 million you save from Darren Waller retiring, and you go and get the best veteran that you can afford, because you need it. Not because you want it, but because you freaking need it. Not only is Stephon Gilmore experienced and seasoned, he's been healthy, and he can mentor some of these younger guys. So, that's kind of how I view this. Stephon Gilmore, let him compete. Let the best man win. I'm tired of handing out jobs. You need guys to kind of step up and get better. But with that being said, you also don't want to have a liability in the secondary in a year where you kind of need to win some freaking football games, and you just reinvested heavily in the trenches in the defensive line, and you're just gonna run it out there with the secondary that could be blown to shreds in a couple of weeks if one injury happens. Anthony, personally, I definitely expect some moves to be made here. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe you think differently, but I want to get your opinion on that.
Well, I have a pretty solid amount of confidence in Nick McLeod entering the season to take over and play a larger role. I thought that in the position that he was in last year as this backup cornerback, whenever he did fill in, I felt like McLeod played some pretty good football. So I don't think that adding cornerback talent is the biggest necessity, but it is something that I would look to do if I were the New York Giants. However, I'm not rushing immediately once we get the retirement, salary cap relief from Darren Waller. I wouldn't rush to just pick up any veteran cornerback available. If I were the Giants, I would probably survey the trade market, see if there's anybody that you can get for a conditional late round pick, somebody who's worthy of being on an NFL roster and isn't collecting dust in free agency, someone who's good and can play immediately. Or I would hold out for preseason. Every week in preseason, there's a round of cuts. The waiver wire is often jumping. The Giants are going to be high up on the waiver priority list due to their draft positioning. They can definitely have a great chance of landing some cornerback talent on the waiver wire during the preseason and training camp period. So that's what I would look for the New York Giants. I wouldn't rush into adding any cornerback talent, because once you sign a veteran to your roster through free agency, let's say, Alex, the Giants added somebody through free agency next week at the cornerback position. Well, then when you get to training camp next month, your younger players are losing some of their reps. Say guys like Cordell, like Nick McLeod even, like some of these other younger players that the Giants might have on their roster. They're going to lose reps the second that you sign a veteran cornerback. So I would rather wait until training camp, see what these young players look like, see how they're performing, and then if they really don't look like they're going to be quality depth for the Giants in the secondary, then you go out there and you find that veteran who could potentially start games for you. So that's kind of my mindset. No rush to bring in cornerback talent, but I do agree that bringing in cornerback talent should be a priority between now and the start of the regular season. But looking at the cornerback talent that the Giants do have, again, I want to discuss Deonte Banks and talk about some of the matchups that he's going to face this year, Alex, because when you look at this Giants schedule, right off the bat, week 1 versus the Minnesota Vikings, true test for Deonte Banks. He's going to be going up against Justin Jefferson. When he's not facing Justin Jefferson, he's probably facing Jordan Addison, some serious receiving talent. Then in week 2, Terry McLaurin and the Commanders. Week 3, you've got Amari Cooper and the Cleveland Browns. Week 4, CeeDee Lamb and the Dallas Cowboys. Week 5, DK Metcalf and the Seattle Seahawks. Week 6, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and the Bengals. Week 7, you're back with Philly. Pittsburgh in week 8, you got George Pickens. Week 9 again with the Commanders. the first 9 weeks of the season is a gauntlet for Deonte Banks and the Giants secondary. That's the point I'm trying to make. Listing off all those receivers and all these different teams, Banks is going to get thrown into the fire immediately. He's going to have to play well against some of the best wide receiver talents in the NFL for the first 9 weeks of the season. He gets a little bit of a break in week 10 against the Carolina Panthers, but even they have Deontay Johnson, who's a great route runner, so you have to keep an eye on that. But pretty much every single game of the season for the Giants this year, maybe there's a few off weeks, but for the majority of them, Deonte Banks is going to have a true bona fide WR1 that he needs to face off against and rise to the occasion. So this is the year for Deonte. Last year as a rookie, he did face a lot of talent. He faced a lot of tremendous wide receiver talent throughout the year as a rookie. That needs to be an experience that went under his belt, made him a better player, so that in year 2, he can be the CB1 for this Giants team and rise to the occasion against all these great receivers that he's going to face again. But Alex, I do wonder how you feel about that. Do you feel a little bit nervous, uneasy that year 2 cornerback Deonte Banks as our CB1 is going to have to go up against an absolute gauntlet of wide receivers? Do you think that could cause a bunch of challenges for him? Do you think that you're confident in his ability to rise to the occasion? Just kind of what is your nerve level as Banks faces off against a ton of top tier talent going into year 2?
You know what? I think this is what it takes to be a CB1, and I think he's pretty damn confident. If you actually watch, look at his aura and the way that he kind of speaks, and honestly, I do think that this. Having Malik Neighbors on this team is going to help him prepare for this, right? Like last year, he's going up against Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins in practice. Now he's going up against Malik Neighbors, who is at that caliber of talent. This is where you see guys like Deonte Banks prepare for this. They didn't have a guy that was going to prepare him for this level of competition in regular season performance, right? Now they have a guy like Neighbors who's going to test him every single day. And then he's going to go and face off against Adams, go face off against Garrett Wilson, guys of that caliber, and be ready for it. You know what I mean? So this is what it takes to be a CB1. If you want to go against CB2 or WR2s and lesser guys, you don't belong on this team. You got to be confident to be a cornerback. These guys are the most egotistical guys on the football field, and there's for a reason for that. If you're not confident, you're going to fail at that position. So, at the end of the day, you got to have short-term memory. Forget about the last play if you give up a nice chunk of yardage and then move on. And I think Banks has that. He certainly has the physical quality. He's one of the most impressive athletes at cornerback that we've seen in a decade. So when you look at that side of it, you're like, okay, this guy's got the tangible tools. He's got the intangible tools in terms of his personality and character. Now he just has to combine those two and get the experience, man. To me, he's got it all. He's got every single thing you need to be a star at the position. Now he just has to go up against the best of the best to actually figure out how to stop them. You know what I mean? It's like being really good at something and never putting it to the test. That's kind of where he is right now. He did it last year, got some really, really good experience. I'm not afraid of him going up against some of the best in football. And in fact, he has to. I'd say if he doesn't, that's malpractice. So definitely looking forward to Deonte Banks' development and growth. Part of this process is struggling against those guys. But let's be real here. Everybody struggles against those guys. That's why they're the best in football. That's why they're all pro receivers. They dominate everybody. So if Banks can hold his ground and at least just not give up a ton of yardage, and he's gonna lose some of those battles. If he can just not be beat all the time, you're already ahead of the curve in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you're totally right. This is a perfect season for a cornerback looking to establish themselves as a CB1, facing off against all this top talent. Like you said, this is what it takes. And if Deonte Banks is able to turn in a solid season with this schedule, then we know we got the truth in him. And you're right. He's got all those athletic traits. He's got all the intangible and tangible traits. He's built to play cornerback in the NFL. It's just about putting that all together this season. And like I said earlier, I thought that Wink Martindale's defense and the way that it was set up really put Banks in a lot of compromising positions. When you're playing man coverage over 50% of the time, it's very difficult to have a low completion percentage against you, because what you're doing the majority of those plays is running with your back to the quarterback. And I know that everybody, when Deonte Banks got drafted, referred to him as a press man coverage cornerback. That was more projection, because during his time at Maryland in college, he wasn't playing a lot of man coverage with his back to the quarterback. He was playing a lot of man match zone coverage defense in a cover 3. And essentially in the cover 3 defense, what Deonte Banks was doing was defending an entire sideline. And anyone that went towards the sideline, he manned up against. And if the receiving matchup that he was facing on the sideline went to the middle of the field, sometimes he would match and follow into the middle of the field and then turn it into a man coverage. But the majority of what he was doing was playing zone coverage on 1/3 of the field. And that's where you really want Deonte Banks, because anybody who goes to that 1/3, he's going to lock them down. He's got the physicality, he's got the speed, the play recognition, all of that. So now that the Giants are transitioning into a more zone-heavy defense, Banks is going to be able to get back to his roots in many ways, play more like he did during his time in Maryland, where he pretty much just locks down a portion of the field. And anybody who comes into that area of the field, you're done. Toast, right? That's kind of how it was for Deonte Banks in Maryland. And also, playing in zone coverage allowed Banks to be a really excellent run defender. If you look at his film during his collegiate career at Maryland, the guy was a tackle machine, and he had really great intelligence and awareness against the run. His run fits were perfect. He was always in the right place at the right time, but it's really hard to be in the right place at the right time when you're playing man coverage, running with your back to the line of scrimmage, and being taken all over the field, because when those wide receivers do their runoffs off the line of scrimmage and you're in man coverage, they can run anywhere and take you out of the play because you're manning up with them. But when you're playing zone defense, when the wide receivers do their runoff, sure, you have to respect their runoff, but you know that there's a zone behind you, so you don't have to just follow them anywhere. You could stay in your run fit and make more plays as a run defender. So I do see a lot more benefits to running zone coverage defense in the NFL level as I do to man coverage. I think that Wink Martindale's defensive system was great at forcing turnovers and applying pressure to quarterbacks and making things hectic for them. However, it just is a system that asks a lot of its defensive backs. And I think that Shane Bowen's defense is going to shift to this zone coverage scheme, and it's going to create less pressure on the secondary because they're not going to be asked to do as much and be put in such challenging positions. I think you're going to get better run defending qualities out of Banks and the rest of these cornerbacks, and I think that you're going to get a much easier time in coverage for all of them because you're not going to see Deonte Banks following Justin Jefferson in man coverage across the field. Who can do that in this NFL? Nobody. You beat those guys through zone coverage. You beat those guys through having a sound defensive system where they run into a zone and you have somebody with high play recognition and they jump the route. Because when you're going man-to-man with Justin Jefferson, good luck, right? He's just such a crafty and amazing route runner. He's elite in every facet of the game. He's going to beat you one-on-one. But Banks doesn't necessarily have to do that so often anymore. He can play his third of the field in a cover 3 or his quarter of a field in cover 4, whatever the Giants are going to run primarily, and he could just lock down an area of the defense through zone. And that's where Deonte Banks really thrived in college. So I think getting him back to his roots, obviously there's a lot of press and a lot of jam and a lot of man qualities to playing that kind of coverage, which is why he was good in man last year. But simplifying this defense and playing more zone coverage, I think, is really going to lead to a huge year 2 breakout for Deonte Banks. And I think when it's all said and done, we're going to be talking about him as a bona fide cornerback 1 in this league by the end of his second season. And I think that the defensive scheme is going to have a lot to do with that. Again, I know when Wink Martindale was questionable whether or not he was staying or leaving, I immediately was like, oh, I don't want to see him leave because this Giants defense was a saving grace last year. But the more that I thought about it, I pretty quickly changed my mind and made my opinion known on the channel that if Martindale did leave, I wouldn't be upset about it because I see a lot of benefits to moving away from such an aggressive, man-heavy defense for the cornerbacks on this Giants roster. So I'm feeling good about the talent that the Giants do have in their secondary. I think that a lot of it looked worse than it really was because of the way that that defense was run under Wink Martindale. But now with Shane Bowen, I think it's going to play a lot more to the strengths of what the Giants have in their secondary. And again, I really do think this is the Deonte Banks season where he breaks out and becomes a great zone coverage cornerback who can also excel in man. Kind of similar to Ahmad Gardner, Sauce Gardner for the New York Jets. He plays an island, and there's a misconception among NFL fans. When you say that a cornerback is playing an island, and you're putting your corner on an island, that's not putting them in man coverage one-on-one against the receiver. That's putting them in a zone and letting them lock down a portion of the field, and that portion of the field is their island and nobody goes there. Deonte Banks can do that the same way that Sauce Gardner does. Now again, Sauce Gardner is an all-pro talent already. I'm not comparing their talents necessarily, but if you want to go with playing style and usage, the way that the Jets use Ahmad Gardner has allowed him to break out very quickly, just putting him on an island and telling him to lock down a portion of the field. The Giants haven't done that with Deonte Banks. They've asked him to run from the right sideline to the left sideline to the middle of the field, all over the place in man coverage. Give him an island, let him own it, let him lock down anybody that comes onto that island, and I think you're going to see a huge breakout from Deonte Banks. So that pretty much wraps up all my thoughts on Deonte Banks, Alex, but I'll give you an opportunity here to kind of give your closing thoughts as well on Banks and the way that he might fit into this defensive scheme and why you may envision a breakout season from him.
I mean, I think that I think Banks is going to be a fine player. I think he's got all the tools to be a great player. I'm more so worried about the other players on this team. What happens if Cordell Flott struggles? What happens, if Nick McLeod doesn't have a great summer? What happens if Andrew Phillips struggles in the slot? This is a sign of a rebuilding team to me, Anthony. I mean, personally, you don't walk out a secondary like this unless you're looking to rebuild this upcoming season or you're looking to get essential players experience. This is not a playoff secondary, right? This is not a team that you're looking at saying, oh, this defense could be top 5 in football, top 10 in football, which you need to win Super Bowl sometimes. This is a team that very much looks like they're going through the motions of getting guys experience so they can either become competent backups or competent starters. At a lot of positions, by the way. This is not just on the secondary. It's also on the offensive line. John Michael Schmitz, Evan Neal at right tackle or guard, wherever the hell he plays. This is not just a single position or single group. This is across the roster. This is happening. Tight end, Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger. This is a situation where young players are getting opportunities, but they are not. These units are very much a big question mark for us, and at least for me. So, in my view, in perspective, the Giants have a few linchpin pieces locked in on long-term deals, and this upcoming season is about developing those pieces that need to step up and provide them cost-efficient production at a very reasonable price tag. So that's kind of where I look at the secondary and say, well, I like Deonte Banks, I like some of these guys, but they're by far one of the worst units in football, and it's not even a conversation. I think Banks is gonna be fine. But Cordell Flott's probably one of the worst CB2s in football because we just don't know what he is. You know what I mean? Nick McLeod, he's a backup for a reason. He will be one of the worst CB2s in football until he proves otherwise, right? Our corner, our slot corner, we don't even know who the hell is playing slot corner. Is it Andrew Phillips? Is it Darnay Holmes? Is Trey Hawkins going to step up? Tyler Nubin's a rookie. This secondary is going to be bad. But it could be better if we bring in another veteran or these guys step up and have great talents. I know it's a little bit more of a pessimistic perspective, but it's also just reality. The Giants are trying to see if their young guys can develop and become legitimate players on this team long term. And I think that's what they need to be doing. Yes, the secondary might be bad, but it's a question that we have to get answered, and this is how you answer it, trial by fire. So I love it. I love the process. I love actually what they're doing with it, but I'm not opposed to bringing in a veteran player to help support this unit, even if it means offering some mentorship for one season, and then you move forward without him. So I think that's kind of where I sit. But yes, love Deonte Banks. Think he's going to be a star. Really is just about getting him experience against top talent at this point.
100%, and he's going to get that experience against top talent for sure. When you're looking at the schedule again, week 1 right off the bat versus Justin Jefferson, I can't wait for that matchup. It's going to be really exciting. And hey, if he rises to the occasion and Justin Jefferson finishes with, let's say, less than 75 receiving yards in week 1, I think we're going to feel really good going into the rest of the season with Deonte Banks as CB1. So that'll be a big one, big test for him right off the bat. But first 9 weeks of the season, absolute gauntlet for our guy Deonte Banks, but I'm confident that he's going to rise to the occasion. And again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm pretty confident in this defensive scheme from Shane Bowen. Now, we'll see how it works with the pass rush and its run defense and everything else in between, but I think simplifying things for the secondary and playing them in more zone coverage should ultimately be a great benefit for these young cornerbacks that we do have. But that pretty much wraps up our thoughts on Deonte Banks and kind of the entire Giants cornerback room. We didn't touch much on the safeties, but I'm sure that we will at another point because that is a whole other area of discussion. Tyler Nubin and Jason Pinnock, what are our expectations for them? Maybe we'll break that down in an upcoming episode. Let us know what you want to hear us talk about next, though, down below. And make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.